Hi BookTube, it's Amy. This afternoon I read a memoir titled A Letter from Paris by Louisa Deasey. So this is her account of her journey to discover the life of her father. And the catalyst for her journey was a Facebook message that she received from a woman named Coralie in France. Now, Coralie had recently discovered from her grandmother that her grandmother Michelle had had a relationship with a man in the late 40s, early 50s. And Coralie traces this man, Dennison, to Louise, because Dennison was her father. And Louise had lost her father at a very young age. He died when she was 6. And so she really didn't know anything about him. And for various reasons, she hadn't really searched very far to learn about him. It was always very painful for her mother to talk about him. She had heard from others that his life was very difficult and somewhat painful. And she had somehow got the impression that he didn't succeed at a lot of things that he tried to do in life and that he was a bit of a failure. So for several reasons, she was almost afraid to go searching into this. Now, his manuscripts and papers had been sold to a library and archives. She later discovered that that money is what helped her mother to buy a house for the family after her father's death. So she had a lot of papers and a lot of resources which she could use to look into her father's life. And after receiving this message from this woman, Coralie, she went to these archives to look for references to Michelle so that she could tell this family in France perhaps a little bit more about the relationship between her and Louisa's father. But of course, as she goes to look for Michelle, as she goes to target papers from 1949, she finds herself discovering many more things about her father. She discovers the time he spent in the Australian Army during World War II. She discovers the time he spent in England post-war, recovering from TB and essentially starving because of the rationing and the crooked behavior of the owner of the boarding house he was staying at. And more optimistically, she discovers the time he spent in France and the life he built there, and how he came to meet his first wife, Gazelle, and build a relationship with her. But also she learns a lot about the people he met and the things he wrote and the things that he achieved. He was in fact a writer who associated with well-known writers and artists of the day, which is why Australian Library and Archives were interested in his papers. And in fact, she finds references to him in various collections throughout the country, as well as published books. And so she begins to piece together this history of her father. And there's sort of a second mystery going on here too, because she's also looking for Gazelle, her father's first wife, who was a godmother to her. And Gazelle was always there, almost as sort of a mother figure in addition to her own mother, until maybe, as I understood it, until she was a teenager, and then suddenly Gazelle disappeared and they couldn't trace her anymore. And so this story is about her searching for not only her father's past, but also what happened to Gazelle. And this journey takes her all the way to France and to England as well. And she retraces some of her father's steps in a search for this family history. And it's quite an emotional journey, but also very interesting as well. Just this digging up of history. And I think I learned a lot about Australian history and the Australian experience during the Second World War, but also more about what it was like to be living in post-war Britain and post-war France. And of course, it was just an immensely interesting journey to read about. Something I would highly recommend if you're looking for a nice light memoir. I've always loved reading memoir, and for some reason I am doubly attracted to a memoir if it somehow involves Paris, especially post-war Paris. I'm not sure why it interests me so much, but it really does. And this was a very well told story. It was told in such a way that I was sort of on the edge of my seat, wondering what she was going to discover next about her father. And there was no big ending or anything, because it was very true to real life. It was just an ordinary woman finding out some things about her very ordinary yet slightly extraordinary father and family. And it's, as I said, it's definitely something I would recommend, and it was an afternoon well spent. If you've read this one, let me know what you think of it in the comments below. I look forward to your comments, and I hope you've all had a lovely Sunday.